Blake Shelton sparks major buzz today with surprise moment. The day started like any other ordinary day. There were no major announcements scheduled, no concert tour reveal, no album drop, no televised appearance. For most people scrolling through their phones that morning, it felt like just another routine news cycle. And then something unexpected happened. It wasn't staged, it wasn't promoted. There were no flashing lights or red carpets. It was simple, quiet, almost easy to miss. But someone noticed. Blake Shelton had stepped into a public space without the usual spectacle that follows celebrities. No dramatic entrance, no entourage pushing cameras away, just Blake, dressed casually, moving through the crowd like anyone else. At first, only a handful of people recognized him. A second glance, a whisper, then widened eyes. Is that really Blake Shelton? Within minutes, phones were subtly raised, not aggressively, not in chaos, but carefully, almost respectfully, the kind of recording that happens when fans don't want to ruin a genuine moment. What happened next is what turned a quiet sighting into a national talking point. Instead of brushing past fans or keeping his distance, Blake stopped. Not for a quick wave, not for a rushed photo. He paused fully. He listened. One fan, visibly emotional, stepped forward. There was no dramatic speech, no performance happening, just words exchanged between two people. Witnesses later described the moment as deeply sincere. Blake leaned in, focused entirely on what the fan was saying. There was no camera awareness in his expression, no public relations smile, just attention. And that's what changed everything. Because in today's world, authenticity travels faster than headlines. The short clip, barely 30 seconds long, hit social media within minutes. At first, it circulated among small fan accounts, then larger country music pages picked it up, then mainstream entertainment blogs reposted it. By afternoon, Blake Shelton was trending. Not because of drama, not because of controversy, but because of a moment. People online began dissecting the clip frame by frame. The way he nodded, the way he placed a reassuring hand on the fan's shoulder, the way he stayed even after others tried to move him along. It didn't look rehearsed. It didn't look managed. It looked human. Comments flooded in. This is why he's different. Real country star energy. Kindness still matters. That's how you treat fans. In a digital era dominated by outrage and scandals, something surprisingly rare had gone viral, a calm, respectful interaction. And that contrast made it powerful. Blake Shelton has spent decades in the public eye, from chart-topping country hits to television appearances and high-profile relationships. He's no stranger to attention. But what made this particular moment resonate wasn't fame, it was simplicity. There were no flashing headlines shouting shocking revelations. Instead, news outlets began covering the story with phrases like unexpected, heartwarming, and refreshingly genuine. Entertainment analysts even weighed in, pointing out how rare it is for unscripted kindness to dominate trending charts. The buzz wasn't explosive in a chaotic way. It was steady, organic, sustained. By evening, reaction videos had started appearing. Fans recreated the moment in commentary clips. Influencers discussed what it says about celebrity culture. Even people who weren't longtime country music listeners shared the video. Because it wasn't just about Blake Shelton. It was about how people want to see public figures behave. In interviews over the years, Blake has often spoken about staying grounded, about remembering his roots, about not letting the industry disconnect him from real life. For many watching the clip, this moment felt like proof of that philosophy in action. There was no need for a stage, no spotlight necessary, just presence. And presence in that moment was enough to spark major buzz across the country. News platforms began summarizing the timeline: morning sighting, midday viral clip, afternoon trending hashtag, evening headline coverage. It unfolded naturally, and perhaps that's why it felt different. In a world where viral moments are often engineered, this one appeared accidental, unfiltered, authentic, and audiences respond strongly to authenticity. Social media metrics reflected it. The original clip surpassed hundreds of thousands of views within hours. Shares multiplied, comments grew by the thousands. But what stood out most was the tone. There was no debate, no backlash, no division, just appreciation. That kind of unified positive response is rare online. Industry insiders quietly noted something important. Moments like this build long-term brand strength more than any promotional campaign ever could, because they aren't advertisements, they're reflections of character. As the night progressed, talk shows and online news segments began referencing the clip. The phrase "surprise moment" appeared repeatedly in headlines. But the surprise wasn't dramatic, it was emotional. People were surprised to see patience, to see calm, to see genuine attention given without cameras being invited. And that's what kept the buzz alive. Blake Shelton didn't post about it immediately. He didn't amplify it himself, which, ironically, made the story grow even more. The silence felt consistent with the moment, natural. By the time midnight arrived, the internet had already labeled it one of the most wholesome celebrity interactions of the week. Country music fans felt proud, casual viewers felt impressed, and those who stumbled across the clip felt reminded that sometimes the biggest headlines don't come from grand gestures, they come from small, quiet choices. The following morning, radio hosts referenced the trending story between songs. Television segments replayed the footage with commentary. Entertainment journalists described it as a reminder of why Blake Shelton remains relevant beyond the charts. Because longevity in the spotlight isn't built only on talent, it's built on connection. And in one unscripted interaction, that connection was visible. The buzz didn't feel forced. It felt earned, and that's what made it powerful. This wasn't a marketing campaign, it wasn't a promotional stunt, it was a moment, witnessed, recorded, shared, and the world reacted.
The next morning, the momentum hadn't slowed down. If anything, it had grown stronger overnight. What started as a simple, quiet interaction had now become one of the most talked about celebrity moments of the week. Morning shows replayed the clip with soft background music, calling it a reminder that authenticity still exists in the spotlight. Radio hosts discussed it between songs, reading listener comments on air. Even entertainment analysts began offering their perspectives on why this particular moment resonated so deeply. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it didn't involve a shocking twist or breaking controversy. And maybe that was exactly the point. In an era where attention is often captured through chaos, Blake Shelton's surprise moment felt like the opposite. It felt calm, intentional, grounded. Viewers noticed the way he stayed focused on the fans speaking to him. They noticed the absence of impatience. They noticed the lack of performance in his expression. Nothing about it seemed exaggerated for the camera. As the clip continued to circulate, more angles surfaced. Another fan had recorded from a different perspective, revealing even more of the interaction. In that footage, you could see Blake gently nodding as he listened, occasionally offering a reassuring smile. There was no rush to end the conversation, no visible signal to move things along, just time given freely. That detail became a major talking point online. People wrote that time is the most valuable thing anyone can give, especially someone with a packed schedule and constant demands. The idea that he chose to pause and give someone his full attention struck a chord. Comments continued pouring in across platforms. This is why he's lasted so long in this industry. You can't fake that kind of presence. Country music was built on connection, and this proves it. The story expanded beyond fan accounts. Larger media outlets picked it up, framing it as an example of how public figures can maintain relatability despite massive fame. Cultural commentators discussed how audiences are increasingly drawn to sincerity rather than spectacle. Blake Shelton's name remained in trending topics not because of scandal, but because of steadiness. That distinction mattered. Industry experts quietly observed how rare it is for a positive, unscripted moment to dominate headlines for more than a few hours. Yet this one carried through the day and into the evening. The narrative didn't shift. There was no backlash. No controversy emerged to overshadow it. The story remained exactly what it was from the beginning, a simple act that made people feel something real. Meanwhile, fans began sharing their own stories of meeting Blake over the years. Social media threads filled with personal anecdotes describing similar experiences, brief but meaningful interactions where he took time to speak, listen, or encourage. The viral clip became a catalyst for reflection. It wasn't just about what happened that day. It became about a pattern of behavior that fans felt they had seen before. That collective memory strengthened the buzz even more. By late afternoon, entertainment reporters began reaching out for official statements, yet there was no dramatic press release issued, no attempt to capitalize on the attention with a flashy announcement. The quiet continued, which only reinforced the authenticity of the moment. It felt untouched by strategy. Behind the scenes, marketing professionals likely recognized something powerful unfolding. Organic goodwill is one of the most valuable assets in entertainment. It cannot be purchased, staged, or forced. It grows naturally from repeated impressions of character. And in this case, one small interaction had amplified years of perceived consistency. As evening approached again, a short post finally appeared on Blake Shelton's social media. It wasn't grand, it didn't mention the viral clip directly. It simply expressed gratitude for fans and appreciation for their support over the years. The tone was humble, understated. That single post gathered millions of impressions within hours, with thousands responding by referencing the now famous interaction. The simplicity continued. Talk shows transitioned from analyzing the clip to discussing what it says about longevity in country music. Some pointed out that Blake Shelton's career has never relied solely on flashy reinvention. Instead, it has been anchored in approachability, humor, and relatability. The viral moment seemed to reaffirm those qualities. Country radio stations reported an uptick in streams for his classic songs. Playlists featuring his biggest hits saw renewed engagement. It was as if the moment had reminded audiences why they connected with his music in the first place. The emotional thread between artist and listener felt visible again. Cultural commentators began framing the story in broader terms. They suggested that audiences today crave grounded behavior from public figures. In a digital world saturated with curated perfection, unscripted sincerity stands out dramatically. The clip became a case study in how authenticity travels faster than spectacle. As days passed, the conversation didn't disappear, it evolved. Instead of focusing solely on the 30-second interaction, people began discussing the larger idea of kindness in public spaces. The story had shifted from celebrity news to something more reflective. Teachers referenced it in classroom discussions about empathy. Motivational speakers used it as an example of leadership through humility. The buzz that began as entertainment news had transformed into something more meaningful. Blake Shelton continued his normal schedule, appearances, recordings, routine commitments. There was no dramatic shift in public behavior, no attempt to redefine his image. The steadiness itself became part of the narrative. He hadn't changed, he had simply been seen. And sometimes, visibility changes perception. Weeks later, the clip still resurfaced periodically in social feeds. It became one of those moments people revisit when discussing positive celebrity culture. It didn't fade like most viral content does. Instead, it settled into a kind of digital memory, a reminder that headlines don't always have to be loud to be impactful. Industry observers concluded that this was not just a trending topic, it was a reinforcement of brand identity. Blake Shelton's reputation as grounded and approachable had been strengthened without a single promotional strategy attached. Fans described feeling proud, not just entertained, but proud. There's a difference between admiring talent and respecting character. The viral interaction seemed to bridge those two feelings. Looking back, what made the moment extraordinary was how ordinary it appeared. No dramatic soundtrack, no grand gesture, just attention, patience, and presence. The world reacted because the world recognized something genuine. In a landscape driven by constant noise, a quiet act had made the loudest impact. And that is why Blake Shelton sparked major buzz, not because he tried to command attention, but because he didn't. The surprise wasn't in what he did. The surprise was in how rare it has become to witness that kind of simple, unfiltered humanity in the spotlight. The headlines eventually moved on, as they always do. New stories replaced old ones, trending lists updated. But for many who saw that clip, the feeling remained. It served as proof that sometimes the smallest moments carry the greatest weight. Blake Shelton didn't plan to break the internet that day. He simply paused. And in that pause, millions found something worth talking about.